face looks weird. Whatever. Okay. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Valentine and here we talk about witchcraft, supernatural, all things strange, bizarre, and anything that tickles my fancy really. Especially Halloween, once Halloween comes around. Is anybody excited that we are almost halfway to Halloween? Maybe by the time this video comes out, we will be. I believe it is May 13th, May 15th. Really looking forward to it. Can't wait. And in honor of halfway to Halloween, I want to start or kick off my spooky sessions. And basically with my spooky sessions, I want to dive more into the paranormal and supernatural and or fae, anything otherworldly. Because recently I've started to wonder if all of the experiences I've had ever since I was a little kid, were they paranormal or were they the fae? The more research I've done into the fae is making me think that maybe they're not spirits that I'm seeing. Maybe they're not weird creatures in the woods that I'm seeing. Maybe what I'm seeing has to do with the fae. And I've never thought of it that way. I've never looked at it that way. I find it interesting that I've always been very willing and ready to believe the paranormal and always ready to be like, the fae, that's not real. What makes me think that one would be more likely to exist and not the other? So I don't know. I've been doing a lot of research and looking into it, and everything that I've experienced could easily fit into the fae. I want to start doing more supernatural and spooky experience kind of story times. If you guys are interested in that at all, let me know. I think it would be fun to share my experiences because I have a lot. I have an exorbitant amount of strange happenings that I don't know how else to explain other than it was supernatural or potentially the fae. To kick off my storytelling of strange and weird things, I wanted to talk about light as a feather, stiff as a board. And if you were ever a child, you've probably heard of light as a feather, stiff as a board. So I don't know about you guys, but as a child, I was really into witchy shit. In case you haven't seen it manifested into reality as an adult, now you know. For me, when I was a little girl, I have like distinct memories of going to my grandmother's tree, and she had a large garden and she had these statues everywhere, and she was an avid plant enthusiast, green thumb to the max. She had one of these trees. I don't think it's called a begonia. I don't know what they're called. The tree had these like gorgeous pink flowers, like bundles of pink flowers everywhere. And they had these little like buds before they bloom. And I would collect them, the ones that had fallen on the ground. If you squeezed the bud, it would make the flower emerge and bloom. So essentially, I was finding all these fallen buds from the trees and I was squeezing them to help them bloom. And with one of the trees, the trunk split into three. So there was like one trunk in the back and there was two trunks on the side, and then they went up to create the rest of the tree. But at the very bottom, at the base of the trunk, that's where they combined and went into the ground. So it ended up creating kind of like a cauldron. in my child mind, that was my cauldron. So there was like this little base, and I would collect all these buds and I would throw them into my cauldron and make wishes on them. I was convinced that if I bloomed the buds and then threw them onto this little concoction at the base of the tree, that my wishes were going to come true. I don't know. I was 100% convinced that I was in tune with something. And this is when I'm like 4. I must have been like 4 or 5. I was very young. I was just, living life as a baby witch. And a part of me wants to think like maybe this is like remnants of an unfiltered call or like draw to the earth, you know, like without societal parameters kind of clouding our views as adults. Like nobody had expectations of me. I was a child, so I could just do what I felt inclined to do. And to me, that solidifies that children have an ability to see and or experience things that we as adults have lost. And personally, for me, nothing drew out my witchy side of, hey, I have a coven of sisters with me right now. Let's get up to some weird shit than at childhood sleepovers. No, I cannot be the only girl who had like a gaggle of girls that were waiting for our parents to go to sleep and being like, what are we gonna summon tonight, friends? So tonight, in my own way, in this through this YouTube universe thing that we can now do, I'm gonna have a slumber party with you, and we're gonna talk about light as a feather, stiff as a board. For those of you unfamiliar, Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board is a game typically played with 3 people and usually seen in childhood sleepovers under very hushed circumstances. Wait for the adults to pass the fuck out, and then we can summon the Dark Lord. For me, I clearly remember a specific instance where I played with 4 other girls. We had all just finished seeing the original The Craft. I know there's like a new one coming out. And each one of us were absolutely convinced that we were specific girls from The Craft. And me and my best friend were constantly fighting over the main character. I was convinced I was her. Like, none of us wanted to be the nice main character. None of us wanted to be Sarah. Nope. Me and my best friend, we were like, fuck that bitch. We're Nancy. I wanted to be Nancy so bad, even though she was crazy. Like, I don't know. And of course, as all of us people who've seen The Craft know, they play a mad game of light as a feather, stiff as a board. I've never gotten their magical, masterful results, but it did work for us. So after seeing this movie, the 4 of us girls had a slumber party, and we waited for the adults to go to sleep. I remember my friend's mom was a single mom, so really we just waited for her to go to sleep, but I believe her grandparents lived with her as well. So once everyone passed out, we scurried out of bed and grabbed flashlights because we didn't have phones back then. And my friend, I don't know what to call her, Rebecca. I don't think I know a Rebecca. Oh wait, yes I do. She doesn't go by Rebecca though. Penelope. My friend Penelope, she had prepared candles. Like, she had this whole thing planned out. Like, she knew she was gonna have a slumber party, and we were gonna be summoning some fucking demons that night. So she was well prepared. We had a lighter. Her mom smoked cigarettes, so she jacked that shit, and we had candles. And once we were absolutely convinced that her mom was passed out, we all scurried and made a summoning circle, in a sense, in preparation for one of us to die. And no, not literally, but the whole story behind light as a feather, stiff as a board is that the person who's being lifted is dead. The game essentially revolves around resurrection, which is actually backed historically. So the first girl out of us to die was, I'm going to call her M, and which was perfect because I am not a small girl. I'm definitely I've never been petite in my entire life. I'm 5'8". I've always been very tall, and then on top of that, I'm just like I'm a big girl. Like, I'm not little. So me and one other girl, we were both bigger, and then there were the 2 smaller ones. I think I said there was 4 girls. 4 girls in total, myself included. But there were 2 smaller girls, and one of them, M, was the smallest. So I think subconsciously we were like, we should have the teeniest, weeniest one go first, because that will increase our odds of a successful lift. You know what I mean? We wanted to like reaffirm that we were witches. Like we wanted to solidify in our minds that we had magical powers. So I think we were like manifest destiny kind of like making sure we couldn't fail. And also you kind of want to like freak yourself out. Like we wanted to get scared. We wanted to be like, holy shit, we're all powerful witches, bow down. And then also kind of be like, I'm terrified of my own power. So if you've never played Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board, the recipe is as follows. You need a minimum of 3 players. One person must portray the deceased. Others must sit around the deceased player. If you're playing with 3, it'll be 1 on either side. One person is kind of the director, almost like a director of a funeral, but one person is the head of the group. And it's up to the head to kind of guide the rest of the players into what to say, because the chant is pretty important. So the head will say to the group, she's looking ill. That's when everybody around the deceased player, or not yet deceased, and they're all like, she's looking ill, which is really creepy to imagine a bunch of little girls being like, she's looking ill. Then the head will say, she's getting worse. And then the rest of the players, minus the deceased, will say, she's getting worse. Then the head will say, she's dying. And then the rest will chant, she's dying. And then finally the head says, she is dead. And the rest chant, she is dead. Then the players will place their index finger and their middle finger typically underneath the player. And in unison, the rest of the players have to start chanting, light as a feather, stiff as a board. They'll repeatedly chant this, and while they're chanting it, they begin to lift up and the deceased will rise. So, now that you know how to play light as a feather, stiff as a board, that is what we played. Definitely not craft style. She wasn't like fucking 3 feet in the air. But we did solidly lift her a couple of inches off the ground. I specifically remember seeing her hair move like on the ground to the point that made me think like, wow, we must be lifting her pretty high for like her hair to like slide down her shoulder and I can see it like on the ground. But at the same time, I was lifting her in the air. I didn't have like a little ruler being like, exactly how many inches have I lifted you off the ground? And M specifically said that she felt like she was lifted really high off the ground and that she was actually freaking out. But in the moment, it must have been the chant because she was completely still. She didn't move. She didn't make a peep. She was dead. Not really. I'm going to keep saying not really because I don't want people to get the impression that I'm talking about a dead girl, because that she wasn't actually dead. She was playing it. It was a role. Pretty soon after she started really feeling it, that's when she started freaking out and was like, I am done. She wanted to be put back down. We put her back down and she was like, no more. I'm not feeling it. And after she started freaking out, not too long after, Penelope's mom came running in and was like, what the fuck are y'all doing? Because we had candles everywhere. So she ended up losing her mind because we were little children with like blankets and long hair with lit candles everywhere. It was a very dangerous combination. 10 out of 10, do not recommend for children. And I can honestly say I've never played since. So in that moment, we did lift her off the ground. We definitely did. Like, I remember 100% we lifted her off the ground. And I remember, like I said, seeing her hair move. And then M herself was super freaked out. We did talk about it at school for like weeks after that. And M didn't want to talk about it. Like, she was so over it. She was not happy. I don't know. I've never played the deceased player, so I don't really know what it's like to have that. So I'm not sure if it like messed with her, especially because we were her best friends, chanting around her like she's getting worse, she's ill, she's dying, she's dead. And then we lifted her into the air. I feel like that would be mildly traumatizing. I don't know. So besides the craft, where exactly did this come from? The first recorded ritual of light as a feather, stiff as a board was back in 1665, smack dab in the middle of the Great Plague. Samuel Pepys, his name looks like Pepys, Samuel Pepys, but I read that it was pronounced Pepys. Samuel Pepys. He was an administrator for the Navy of England and pretty fucking famous. He was a member of the parliament, and he is now known for extensive diary keeping. Diaries of Samuel Pepys are well known and commonly assigned, I think, to kids in high school to read because it's basically firsthand accounts of what life was like back then. For the English Restoration period, his diaries are considered like absolutely vital in knowing what was happening. And they included pretty amazing and terrible things like the Great Plague, the Second Dutch War, and the Great Fire of London. And his diary was more than 1 million words long. Dude went hard on record keeping, which is why they're so valued. And he is often celebrated, or his diary is celebrated, as one of Britain's most influential works. In this diary that historians actually use to get firsthand accounts of what happened, what life was like, that's where Samuel Pepys documented the first known record of light as a feather, stiff as a board. In the diary, he describes an event which was told to him by one of a really trusted friend of his. So it wasn't him directly, it was his friend. But he goes on to explain in his diary that he really believes his friend. He's like, no way this dude's lying. This is what happened. Basically, the friend described seeing a couple of girls chanting over a little boy who was pretending to be dead. The girls spoke of the boy and described exactly how he died. Like, they had a full background story of what took over him. And then once the girls claimed that the little boy had died, they began chanting light as a feather, stiff as a board, and they ended up lifting him into the air, according to the friend, well over their heads. Samuel Pepys' friend was in so much disbelief that he was like, ugh, well, of course y'all can do it. He's a little boy. So obviously these little girls can lift a little boy. No big deal, no big feat. And he wants to challenge these little girls, like every respectable adult man, to prove themselves would challenge little kids. Not weird at all. So he challenges these little girls to lift an adult man, and not just any adult man. He picked a guy that was, I think Samuel says, of sturdier stock, which basically means, he was a large man. So to challenge these little kids, or let me find the biggest dude and let's see if you can do that again, little girls. Let's see if you can do that again. Okay, calm down, Samuel. Calm down. Oh wait, it's not Samuel. It was Samuel Pepys' friend, not Samuel. I'm sorry, Samuel Pepys. I'm like, calm down, Samuel, calm down. And it wasn't even you. I'm sorry. Calm down, Samuel's friend. So sure enough, the little girls do the same thing to this guy. I believe he was a chef. They ended up talking about how the chef died, how he got sick, how he was getting worse. And then once he died, they chanted light as a feather, stiff as a board, and they ended up raising him up into the air. And this was a large man compared to 3 tiny little girls. The phrasing the little girls used is very similar to what they used, or what we used today. When I was younger, I don't know if, I think there's several different chants and ideas of the game that people use, but this is how the little girls said went. Behold a dead body, still as stone, cold as marble. Light as a spirit, we lift you in the name of Jesus Christ. Now, if you're like me, you might be thinking, Jesus Christ, where did that come from? I've never correlated light as a feather, stiff as a board with Jesus Christ before. However, it's not so random. This was right during the time where Christianity was spreading like wildfire. And due to its influence, it was becoming more and more common, heard of, and popular to reference Jesus Christ. Tales of Jesus and his resurrection from the grave were kind of symbols of hope, especially during this time when the plague was rampant. Everyone was seeing death and dying and decay just common on the street, like it was no big deal. Literally, they would see bodies in the streets covered in white sheets on a daily basis, which actually is where the whole like ghost in a white sheet stereotype comes from. They think is from the Great Plague because of how many dead and dying were just out to view, and people knew that they were dead and decaying because of the white sheets over them. So that's where that came from. And because death was everywhere, it was becoming really popular to act out stories from the Bible, specifically the one of Jesus being resurrected. And because the fathers and the priests, popes, I don't really know how that works. I think there's only one pope. I don't know why I said popes. Anyways, but because the fathers or the priests were not allowed to act out or act out any parts in the play, they would pick children. Most often they would pick children to depict Jesus dying and getting nailed to a cross and then being resurrected. So these kids are like super excited to participate in these plays on the streets. It's something to occupy their mind other than, the plague, the Great London Fire, like the war, all that stuff. These kids are going through a really hard time, and they get to act in a play and in a weird way have hope for the afterlife and what happens to dead bodies. And then I'm sure several of these, many of these kids, not several, experienced loss and loved ones at a really young age. I'm sure it was really comforting to imagine being able to be resurrected. I mean, during the Great Plague of London, 15% of the population had died due to the plague. And now here comes this new religion with this hot guy, not like hot, I mean like hot as in new, story of a guy who could die, get resurrected, and had a place for all of your loved ones. And his name was Jesus. That I feel like would be really comforting and definitely worked its way into children's games. In a way, Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board is about a group of girls watching death take over someone they care about, and then together as a unit, they help resurrect him towards heaven. He's light as a feather, and they're resurrecting him to the above. Maybe to the afterlife, and in the name of Jesus Christ, these little girls are lifting him to the heavens, or potentially trying to, do some necromancy shit and just like straight resurrect him, like just straight bring him back to life. Maybe it was that. I don't know. Take it how you want, but 365 years later, children are still playing this game with many, many accounts of success, including my own. We for sure lifted her up. That is the origins of Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board, and that was my little tale of playing Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board with my little friends, where we wanted to be Nancy and part of the craft. I've never played as an adult. I think it would be a lot more fun to try to play as an adult and see what happens. Yeah, I think I could appreciate it in a whole different level as an adult. Anyway, so that is it for today. I just wanted to touch up on a brief little story and a brief little bit of history. Maybe in the future we can talk about some of my supernatural experiences. I'll have to really organize my thoughts. I will rant and ramble and get very off track. And I think I tried recording my werewolf story. People are gonna be like, this bitch is crazy. I do have a werewolf story. I tried recording my werewolf story probably like 6 months ago, well before I've ever actually published anything. And I rambled for so long. Like there was no possible way that I could have edited that video into being something like coherent and worth watching. It was so long. I think it was like 2 hours or more. So anyways, I think I will start working on organizing my thoughts and trying to like mainstream a story. So yeah, let me know if you guys are interested in that. Please give this video a like if you liked it. You can dislike it if you want to. And leave a comment down below. Have you played Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board? And did you have any success? And have you played as an adult? That's something I really want to do. Maybe I can like film it or something. Like us failing. We are not necromancers, unfortunately. But yes, so thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on Instagram at ValentineBardot and Twitter at ValentineBardot. Though I've never posted on Twitter, like ever in my entire life. I just don't really see what the point of Twitter is. Anyways, okay, thanks guys. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.